get the road on the showed, still getting this, figuring all of this stuff out and getting the hang of it. There's 18 different things going on at once. But as far as this class is concerned, you see, we're starting to move our history to the English-speaking countries and America, and we will get up to next week, the First Amendment. So we will do a test, not next week, but the week after. So that's, if today's the 17th and it's the 24th, so just for the end of the month, we will have a test on all the ancient stuff to the First Amendment. So that's up and coming. And as you see, we have today and tomorrow an extra credit quiz, I call it. It should be easy. It's right from last time's class, and it's real straightforward. Just, you know, it's common sense. You can look it up. There really should have no problem. You should have no problem getting the 5 points for that. So anyway, it's easy question just to keep you honest and looking at the class and participating. So that's what's it. We have, again, a extra credit due, extra credit today, and it's due by tomorrow night. And then we'll talk about some more history, and we'll have another one of these next week, and the week after that we'll have a test. So that's what's up and coming. Anyway, so that's what we got. Anyway, so we'll get going. So last time we ended at the printing press, and what a big deal that was. So anyway, the effects of the printing press we saw were pretty huge.
The modern world is unimaginable without the prevalence of the printed word. Paper making and printing was developed during the Islamic Renaissance in the 8th century and spread to Europe during its Renaissance in the 14th. But the desire for new ideas and learning was limited by technological barriers. All printing was done manually, a laborious process producing only around 40 pages a day. German inventor Johannes Gutenberg made a breakthrough in 1450. After years of experimentation, he finally completed a printing press which revolutionized printing. The first book he published in 1456 established the growing dominance of European society on the world stage, a 4th century Latin edition of the Bible.
See, one of the reasons I got this from the Israel, it shows you what their perception is. Even in the Arab countries, they saw that the printing press started the dominance of the Western world over the Islamic world. Not because we had guns, but because we had ideas that could be spread.
Within 40 years, Gutenberg's presses were built in Italy, France, England, and elsewhere. Ironically, one early printed pamphlet was written in defense of scribes whose livelihoods were threatened by the new technology. The press also had social and political effects. bringing books out of the church and into the universities. In 1476, merchant William Caxton established a printing press in England. In 1516, the scholar Erasmus published a version of the Bible based on the original Greek. It contradicted the Latin text propagated by the Catholic Church for its own narrow interest, such as receiving payment for delivering absolution.
See, all of a sudden, you can start questioning authority. You can question the priest, you can press the Pope, because you have your own Bible and your own ideas.
The English chaplain William Tyndale smuggled 18,000 New Testament Bibles into England in the early 1500s, where they were prohibited by the establishment. All people caught distributing the book were burnt at the stake and the Bibles were destroyed. Tyndale himself heresy in 1536. But the printing press didn't completely take off until the English Civil War in the mid-17th century. The Levellers used printed publications to advocate radical democratic reform, and the Royalists to defend the established order. It was a heady fusion of technology, increasingly educated mass audiences, and a breakdown in censorship laws which enabled unofficial publications. The press was burgeoning in Western Europe, but in Eastern Europe, Russia, the Middle East, Africa, and India, printing remained a small-scale specialist activity until the 1700s. Printing presses were built in the Islamic world in the late 1400s, but printing in Arabic and Turkish was prohibited. The Ottoman Empire was in a period of long decline, and its rulers feared the potentially radical impact the word would have on society. But Turkish diplomat Ibrahim Mutafarika was convinced that the only way to halt the decline of Ottoman rule was the widespread dissemination of the scientific ideas which underpinned the advancement of the Western powers. He persuaded the Ottoman Sultan to establish a state-run press in 1729. In 1775, political agitator Thomas Paine sold 500,000 copies of his pamphlet Common Sense, which advocated American independence.
We'll get to that. That's way down the pike. The difference is, though, in the short run, you had, with the printed word, more people could read and more people could have independent ideas. So that's the huge thing that happened. And that started the Protestant Reformation and the English Civil War. The problem is, and we have that problem today, how do you balance out new ideas with keeping orders, with law and order, and keeping people from having a revolution? So we moved to England because we're speaking English. And a lot, as even the Arabs said there in that last video, a lot happened in England.
Used to grow my wheat.
Okay.
Have a duty to spread the good news.
Here's
If
very
the new monarchy
early.
is about anything at all, then it is about liberty. Liberty from old superstitions, from fear and guilt. We are moving, my friends, from the darkness into the light. I'm in agreement.
Beginning of the printing press in
You
England.
have a new weapon
The new
to
weapon.
promote our ideas.
That new scary
What
weapon.
in God's name is that?
It's called a printing press, my lord. And it will change the world.
Change the world. The young Henry VIII saw it. Anyway, William Caxton, shortly after Gutenberg sets up in shop in England, printed the Canterbury Tales, which spread the unified English language. Before then, you had people speaking French and Saxon and Latin. You started having one language. La Mort d'Arthur, the death of Arthur, the King Arthur stories, cultural things. And at the same, shortly thereafter, Henry VII, father of Henry VIII, sets up a licensing scheme saying, aha, if you run a printing press, you need a license from the king, and if we don't like what you say, we will pull your license. And that's been something that people have tried ever since. Licensing and limiting the freedom of the press, we don't allow that here. Other limits, censorship, we call that prior restraint. Taxation and stamps, you had to use the king's paper and have it stamped that it was approved before it went out. If you didn't like it, they used what they called a star chamber, and if the king did not like what you printed, you could possibly lose your ears or nose. Prosecution for libel and sedition. Damaging falsehood, sedition is treason. We're still talking about that today. But again, more things get published. In the 1500s, again, culture becomes big and transmitted through Shakespeare. Shakespeare, again, it's not just the live plays, it is his first folio, the book of all his plays that everyone read. Julius Caesar, Shakespeare rediscovered him from the ancient learning that we got from the Arabs. So again, things are moving worldwide, and the spread of ideas comes from the printing press because you have more books, you have more things to read, and if people read different things than what the king or the pope says, they start to ask questions. And when that happens, kings and popes want to limit free speech. What are the limits and how? Still arguing that today. First newspapers start shortly thereafter.
FanDuel's simple app makes it easy to get closer to the game. But to get Dan even closer, we've arranged for him to experience a genuine James Harrison.
Latest football scores.
How
Morning
newspapers
paper.
work. Yep, remember Julius Caesar. That's why I remember him. That is a Venetian coin.
Dr. Z, we can't hear the video.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I don't have money.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Could you hear the last video?
Yeah, I can hear the last video. I just can't hear this one.
All right, well, not sure what the issue is there. You could see the issue. Anyway, first thing was advertising. You would put up a playbill saying that there would be an announcement for a new play or a sale of pigs or hay or whatever. And people would pay the printer to put the announcement up. And once people saw, oh wow, we can put these announcements up, the government started putting news in there to use the same technology to put in news. But advertising came first because, again, it's a business. All right, we move to the United States. Why did the United States, anybody, become a hotbed of, and I almost asked that, why did the United States become such a big deal for free press? Anybody? Why was, you can chime in, you can unmute yourself. Why did the United States become the crucible of free press and free speech in the world.
Was it because we were one of the newest civilizations?
Yep. And what are the hallmarks of that civilization?
Freedom. Freedom of press.
And why were we more free than people in Europe?
Because we fought to defend it.
Not yet. That came about 150 years later than the colonies. The colonies came for religious freedom. You had the Puritans in Massachusetts. You had the Catholics in Maryland. You had commercial interests in New York and plantations in the South. So you had all these different interests coming to be free. But they didn't fight for another 150 years. So why did America become the place where all this free speech worldwide started?
We already had democracy.
Not really.
We had a lot of trees.
We had the English tradition but they also had a king. So yes and no. They had the Magna Carta where the nobles had more power, but you still had a king in England. So kind of democracy, but not where we are today. Maybe along that continuum. Okay, I'll give you a couple of reasons. First hand, America's far away. And this happens, the king's not here. It took 2 months to get from England to the colonies. So if the king heard about something, he wouldn't hear about it for 2 months at least. Secondly, and you all have alluded to this, that we had an educated populace. The people in England had the printing press. They were able to read and they had ideas and they were far away from the people who would control those ideas. But that's the same true of the French in Canada and the Spanish in South America and Mexico. Why did it happen here and not in Canada or Mexico? They read in French and Spanish. The English came to stay. The French and the Spanish came to find gold, to convert the Indians, to get furs in Canada, but the English came to stay. So you had a lot of people. You had population density. You had cities and towns who could pass ideas and newspapers. You only had trading posts in Canada and Mexico. But in America, you had a big educated population. You had, as you alluded, a idea that came for freedom. And again, they came for freedom. They got away from the king. And there were an educated population all talking. So we were unique in the world from the 1600s. And then the first printing presses came in Boston. The first newspaper in Boston came in 1690. And newspapering came off. The New England Courant, my home state, Hartford, Connecticut, founded in 1718 by one James Franklin, who hires his brother, Ben. Okay, we go to the next one. Come on, open up. Okay. Why America, we just said. And slideshow from. Ben Franklin. Ben is considered the first American by many by many historians. He was our first meteor star. He got rich running not just the printing press, but Poor Richard's Almanac. It was a collection of ideas and saying, you know, early bed, early to rise, and all of that. That was Ben Franklin who collected all that. Ben was also the inventor of the advice column, patients do good. You know, and so he did all sorts of things. So he became famous, and when you become rich and famous, you not only get money, but you buy time. Talk a little about Ben, and that'll be, oh no, copyright, oh. At work just yesterday, okay. Video. Yeah, this is the same video. First they boiled it down rather than watching the whole thing. Silenced, but patients are silenced. Just collected folktales. Yeah. See that flag still. This was an interesting little story. I don't know if they get it into this biography, but when he was representing the colonies to the court, he found out that one of the noblemen was stealing money from the crown. He went to the king and said, hey, this guy is stealing from you. Ben says, well, yeah, and the king says, yeah, he said, he tattled on this nobleman, and the king said, who are you? A commoner should not question a nobleman. And he was thrown out of London for questioning a nobleman. So he went back to this country and we had a revolution. The revolution was personal. Again, that whole idea of free thinking, free ideas, and the fact that he was a regular person of small means was a huge, big deal. That could not happen in England. Somebody who came from nothing could not become rich and famous. So that entrepreneurial spirit, that being the media person, he really was the first American and was so much the part of our character. So you ask why it happened here. We had an educated population, we had the printing press, and we had the freedom of thought. And he demonstrated that. So that's stuff to think about. Next week, we will get to the Revolution and the First Amendment. Anyway, that's how a bill becomes a law. I appreciate everybody. Okay, someone had some issues with the quiz. I'll double check that. It's working with some folks.
Yeah, it says 0 questions for me.
It shouldn't. I'll check that right now. All right, so I'll make sure about that. Any other questions?
I just opened the quiz, and so what should I do about that? Because it doesn't have any questions for me as well.
Okay, just close it, and it allows me to redo it, and I'll fix that right away.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Appreciate it. Do that right now. Okay, anyway, other than that, have a good one.
See ya.
All right, appreciate it.
Bye, Dr. Z.